A few days ago, I watched a video by Alison Talks Books about book influencers replacing book critics. And it kind of got stuck in my head. And I didn't disagree with the video at all. I agreed with all the points made. And she's tagged. By the way, she's brilliant. Watch her content. But it got stuck in my head because I'm in this weird position where I'm in both sides of it. Most people online know me from YouTube, BookTube. What most people don't know is that I do freelance media and book criticism for newspapers and websites. I've done that for a little while. And I'm not naming names because it's an entirely separate thing and you guys don't need to know that. That's not really the point. The point is that I've spent enough time around these spaces to realise that neither side is simple as people pretend it is. And before we get into it, I have to just remind you, my name's Tav James. Like, sub, tell me what you think in the comments below. Become a channel member or join my Patreon if you want to. Hi. But the conversation feels increasingly weird. That's me being really honest. Because every time someone talks about books online now, it feels like you're expected to pick a team. You're either team academic book critic or team book influencer, and I don't think I really fit into either one. I've worked with outlets where I've looked at the book list being covered and genuinely thought, who's actually reading these? And they're not bad books. But because sometimes traditional media can feel completely disconnected from the average reader. The industry changes, readers have changed, tastes change, internet changes, and sometimes institutions can be really slow catching up with them. That's real, and I think Alison was absolutely right about that. But also, I've spent enough time in book spaces online where I see the opposite problem, because a lot of book content isn't really about the books anymore. And yes, don't get defensive, I can hear you typing away now. I'm not talking about everyone. There are brilliant creators who make brilliant content on YouTube and TikTok and all those places. There are people doing genuinely interesting work. But there's also a lot of content where the actual book just feels superfluous. The book doesn't matter. It's vibes, it's aesthetic, it's tropes, it's mood boards on Pinterest, it's playlist, it's ranking fictional dragon boyfriends. And somewhere in that middle of all of that noise, the book itself just leaves the room. Sometimes I've finished watching a 10-minute video and realised I don't know anything about the book. I don't know about the themes, I don't know about the structure, I don't know what the author was trying to do. I just know the main character is kind of brooding, wears black and sometimes cries. And that's the disconnection I've always had with the book spaces online. Because criticism isn't supposed to be marketing. We're all very good at selling products. Let's be real. But the goal shouldn't be to convince someone to buy the thing. The goal should be to help someone understand the thing and maybe they'll buy it. Those are two massively different jobs. And then, to make it even more complicated, the professional side of it has its own problems. Because I've read reviews where I feel like the reviewer is using the book to talk about, or as an excuse to talk about how clever they are. You know the kind of review where you finish reading it and someone somehow has, well, you spent more time learning about the reviewer's university reading list than the actual novel. The book becomes a prop, a framework, a launch pad for a lecture. And I think that can be really frustrating. I find it frustrating. Because if influencer culture treats books like products, certain corners of criticism treats books like homework. And most readers don't want either of those things. They just want to talk about the actual books. And that's the thing that kind of keeps sticking with me. I don't think the average reader is looking for a 30-second trope list. But I also don't think they're looking for someone writing a dissertation every time a dragon shows up. There's this massive middle ground that is completely empty. And every time someone tries to occupy it, things get strange. I've noticed this on my own channel. You make something deeper. and people tell you it's not that deep, it's just a book. Books are supposed to be fun. Stop overthinking it. Use one word someone doesn't know and suddenly you're accused of showing off or being pretentious. Then you make something a bit lighter, something a little more casual, something a little more approachable, and a different group of people will tell you it's not deep enough. So you do realise, as a creator, the audience often say one thing and engage with something completely different. And I think a lot of people genuinely don't know what they want. I think they're responding to whatever's catching their attention at that moment. One thing I've noticed with my professional writing on the websites, because I do read the comments on the places that do have comments, the discussion feels very different. Not always, nothing is universal, but the comments under articles tend to be more interested in the book itself. People disagreeing, people arguing, people challenging points, but the discussion is usually about the text, the book, the ideas. Meanwhile, online book spaces often feel like they're having completely different conversations. And the one thing that just exhausts me is how quickly everything becomes political discourse. Now, before somebody starts typing an angry comment, yes, books can be political. Yes, I know. Some books are explicitly political. Some books are impossible to discuss without discussing politics. That's obviously true. But not every conversation needs to become a referendum on society. Sometimes a romantic fantasy novel is exactly what it says on the tin. A woman having an adventure with a dragon rider man. It's not always some profound ideological statement. Sometimes it's just entertainment. Sometimes people are reading because they've had a terrible week and want to spend 6 hours somewhere else. That's okay. That's healthy. I think one of the strongest points Alison made was that there needs to be more professional and academic voices entering these spaces. And before anyone says it, it's not because they're better or because they're smarter, but because they're bringing something that feels currently underrepresented, actual criticism, actual discussion, actually analysing the book. Not everyone has to do it, but somebody should. Because if all criticism disappears, then eventually everything becomes marketing. And everything becomes recommendation culture, everything becomes hype or tropes, and everything becomes algorithmic. Everything becomes somebody pointing at a cover while trending audio plays in the background. Maybe that sounds a bit dramatic, but genuinely I think we need more voices, because if all book content is that, there's a problem. Criticism serves a purpose. Good criticism helps us understand why something works, why it fails, why it matters. Why it doesn't. It creates discussion, it creates disagreement, it creates conversation, and I think we're starting to lose some of that. Not completely. There are some great content creators doing incredible work, but there's definitely pressure. Especially if you're a reviewer, especially if you're a writer, especially if you're trying to build an audience. There's pressure to join what Alison called the circus, and honestly that's probably the best description I've ever heard. Because sometimes it feels like everybody knows the performance is happening, but nobody wants to be the first person to stop performing. I don't know, maybe this is me just getting older. Maybe it's me spending way too much time in both worlds. Maybe I'm completely wrong. But I think there's room for something in the middle. Something thoughtful without being pretentious. Maybe something intellectual without trying to prove it's intelligent. Something that's accessible without becoming advertising. Something that treats books like books. Which feels like a very strange thing to ask in a book space, but here we are. Anyway, go watch Alison's video, it's genuinely excellent. And I'll be curious to know where you sit in all of this, because the more I think about it, the less convinced... I don't know. I'm less convinced that this is critic versus influencer. I think it's really a conversation about actually wanting what book discussions need to be. And judging by the internet, I'm not entirely sure any of us know the answers. And that's being honest. Like I said, I'm Darth James. If you like this video, feel free to join my Patreon, check out Substack, become a channel member, like, sub, hype, leave a comment, get involved. And I'll see you guys in the next one.